ってきた。危ない。
My name is Ronald Hill, and I've been a truck driver for most of my life. I'm 43 now, and this job is very special to me. It's been my livelihood and my family's for many years. I enjoy it, and it's brought me great friends who are also fellow drivers. But it also has a dark side. It's no secret that driving on United States of America's highways has become dangerous for truckers. And not only because of crime, many of my friends and I have experienced strange events that defy any logical explanation. This story is about one such event that happened to me some time ago, and to this day remains a mystery to me and those who know it. I was returning from delivering a load, heading back to my city. It was past 11 at night. The road was quiet, with little traffic and pitch dark. I was listening to music when suddenly a friend of mine, also a trucker, called me on the radio. I answered happily, surprised, because I thought he was on vacation. He had told me he'd take his kids to a theme park in United States of America City for summer break. He didn't explain why he was working. He just said his truck had broken down on a dirt road and, knowing I was nearby, asked if I could help since he couldn't reach anyone else. I told him sure, just give me the exact location so I'd know how long it would take me to get there. He gave me a very precise location, which was actually helpful so I wouldn't get lost. I told him I'd be there in about an hour. I tried to keep chatting, asking why he hadn't gone on vacation, just to keep him company, but he hung up immediately. I didn't think much of it and drove on. He hadn't told me exactly what was wrong with his truck, so I figured maybe I'd just give him a lift and he could come back the next day with a mechanic. But I was worried. It's dangerous for anyone to be alone out there. When I reached the spot, he told me to take a turn into a remote dirt road. It was isolated, no lights, no towns, just wilderness and darkness. I started feeling uneasy, not thinking about ghosts but rather about the dangers from people. I tried calling him on the radio again to get his exact position since I was already in the location he'd given me, deep in the brush, but he never answered. I arrived at a clearing with no vegetation, just bare dirt. The road simply ended. That's when I knew something was wrong. I called his cell phone, no answer. I then called his wife, and she did pick up. I tried to sound calm, not wanting to scare her, but before I could finish explaining, she interrupted. Wait a minute. Roberto, Manuel is here with us. Didn't he tell you we were taking the kids on vacation? I felt a cold chill run through me. My heart started pounding. The voice that had called me was my friend Manuel's, or something that could imitate his voice perfectly. And it knew my name. His wife handed him the phone. What's going on, brother? Are you okay? Manuel asked. I quickly told him what had happened. He immediately said, "Get out of there now. I didn't call you. My truck is here at home. Someone, or something, wanted you to go to that place." The call cut off. I tried calling back, but there was no signal. As I turned my truck around to leave, I saw multiple silhouettes emerging from the darkness ahead. Shapes I had never seen before. They didn't look human, they weren't human, and they began walking toward me. I floored the gas, turning around as fast as I could, and the thing started running at me. My heart was pounding like a drum. I could barely see behind me in the darkness, but then my radio crackled again. Thinking it might be another trucker, I answered, only to hear a deep, unnatural voice I had never heard before telling me not to leave, saying they wouldn't hurt me. I hung up immediately and kept driving toward the highway. The radio kept hissing with the sound of mocking laughter, many voices, but not human ones. I don't know what they were, but I never stopped and I never looked back. Finally, I made it to the main road. Minutes later, my cell phone got a signal again, and Manuel called, worried because he didn't know what was happening. I told him I was fine, heading home, and not to worry. That night, I got home still shaking. I told my wife, then my colleagues, who believed me instantly. They've also been victims of the unknown when the darkness takes over the highways. I'll never know what imitated my friend's voice so perfectly, or why it wanted me there. And I don't want to imagine what would have happened if I hadn't gotten away in time, or if I'd broken down. I'm certain of one thing: if that night had gone differently, I might not be here telling you this story. Hello everyone, this story I'm about to tell you happened years ago when I was a truck driver living in the United States. I worked in my trailer, traveling from state to state every week. I loved it because I got to see places I had never been before, many of them truly beautiful. I traveled both day and night, with no fixed schedule. Whenever someone requested my trucking service, I would take the job regardless of the hour, as it was very well paid. Whenever I share this story, people always ask if I ever saw strange things on the road while driving. My answer is yes. It would be strange if I said no, because I've always believed we are surrounded by things we can't see, and many of them hide at night in remote, desolate places, like highways and the vast mountains beside them. What I'm about to tell you is, without a doubt, the most incredible and disturbing thing that happened to me during those years of work. I remember I was making a long trip from California to Pennsylvania. I slept in my cab and then continued my route. It was winter, so it was very cold. That night, around 3:30 a.m., I was looking for a gas station or a 24-hour diner to buy some coffee and food. Eventually, I saw some lights a short distance ahead. It was a small diner, luckily open. I pulled off the road and parked outside. There were no other cars, but I didn't think much of it. It was logical there'd be no customers at that hour. When I went inside, I expected it to be warm, but it was as cold as outside. I decided to order my food to go so I could eat in the warmth of my truck. That's when the strange part began. There was one table occupied by two men who stared at me from the moment I stepped inside. It made me uncomfortable, but I ignored them and went to the counter. Behind it stood a woman of about 60, with a stern expression, watching me closely. I also noticed a cook in the back, looking at me through the serving window. They were acting strangely, but I wasn't yet afraid, just confused. I told the woman I wanted to order. Without speaking, she handed me a paper and pen to write it down. I did so, noted it was to go, and handed it back. I then asked for the bathroom, and she silently pointed the way. I quickly went in, relieved myself, washed my hands and face, and checked my old cell phone for messages from my wife. Then I opened the bathroom door and froze. The place was dark and abandoned. The tables were broken, the walls crumbling, and the counter was gone. Debris and trash covered the floor, making it hard to walk without tripping. Shaking with fear and confusion, I stumbled toward the exit. Outside, a police car pulled up. I walked out with my hands up. The officer asked what I was doing there. I couldn't tell him the truth. He wouldn't believe me and might think I was on drugs. I told him I couldn't hold it any longer and had gone inside to use the restroom. He checked me, then my truck, and went inside with a flashlight. When he came back, he warned me never to enter abandoned places again and to wait for a gas station instead. I thanked him but couldn't resist asking what that place used to be. He looked as if recalling something terrible, then told me it had been a famous diner in the 90s, always full of truckers. One day, 2 armed men entered and killed 12 people. After that, it closed, and no one ever reopened it because of the tragedy. I left in my truck, trembling with fear. I kept asking myself why this happened to me, why the place appeared alive when I passed by, and why they'd wanted me there. Those people who stared at me clearly were no longer alive, and it was the first time I had ever seen the dead. It was not pleasant. Not at all. I'm left only with this horrible experience to tell, but I wish it had never happened to me. I work for a moving company in the United States, and I've been with this job for years. My work consists of transporting clients' furniture and belongings to their new homes in my truck. I make long trips, meaning from city to city, and sometimes even to other states. First of all, my name is Felipe, and the following story I want to share happened to me on one of these trips while I was transporting furniture and belongings for a family who was moving from Washington to Colorado. It was going to be a long trip, so I prepared all my things and hit the road. Night fell, and I was on the phone with my mother, who was telling me about some problems that had happened at home, when suddenly I heard some banging noises coming from the trailer. They were so loud that even my mother asked me over the phone what that sound was. I told her I didn't know, it was coming from the trailer, and maybe something had fallen. I told her I had to hang up so I could pull over somewhere and check that everything was fine. I stopped in a spot, grabbed my flashlight, and went to check the back. I opened the doors and saw that everything seemed in order, but I still decided to climb in and look around. If anything happened to the client's furniture, we had to pay for it as new. I walked all the way to the back, and everything was perfectly arranged, just as my coworker and I had organized it before I left. But then I noticed something at the very back. There was a cardboard box leaning on its side, and on the floor were a lot of toys scattered around. This struck me as strange, because all the boxes had been completely sealed. We had made sure of it ourselves. I could understand if the box had fallen, even though I had been driving carefully, but I couldn't explain how it had opened with so much tape sealing it. Anyway, I gathered all the toys, checked they were intact, put them back in the box, closed it again with the same tape, and left it on the floor so it wouldn't fall again. Then I closed the doors and continued driving. A few minutes later, I called my mother again to let her know everything was fine, since I knew she had been worried. We kept talking about what she had been telling me, when suddenly the banging noises came again from the back. But this time, it wasn't just banging, I also heard humming, like someone was softly singing. I told my mother what was happening, and she said that wasn't normal, that I should stop at a gas station with plenty of light and check the trailer carefully. So I stopped at the first gas station I saw, hung up the phone, and went inside the trailer again. I have to say that while I was walking outside the truck, I could still hear the humming, only now it was clearer and closer, and it sounded like it came from a little girl. I hurried to open the doors, and when I went inside, the sound stopped. I called out to see if anyone was there, but there was no reply. I walked to the back again. Even though there was light outside, it didn't reach that far inside, so I pulled out my flashlight. And again, I saw the same cardboard box, tipped over, with all the toys scattered across the floor. My skin crawled just seeing that, because this time there was no way it had fallen and opened by itself. I started putting the toys back into the box, but as I was doing that, the trailer doors slammed shut behind me. I ran to open them, but I couldn't. They could only be opened from the outside. Panic set in. I started banging on the truck to see if someone would hear me, but I had parked far away from the store and the gas pumps because I didn't want to block anyone. I didn't understand what was happening. Nothing like this had ever happened before, and I knew no one was outside. I had seen and heard no one while checking. I kept pounding desperately for help, and that's when I heard it, a little girl's laugh coming from the very back of the trailer. I shone my flashlight, but saw nothing. I was sweating, running out of air from hitting the doors so much, and terrified of whatever was inside there with me. I called my mother and told her what was happening. She called the police and gave them my location, and they sent a highway patrol officer nearby. I couldn't tell you how long it took for them to arrive. It felt like forever. The whole time I was in there, the little girl kept laughing, and the toys moved. I didn't want to shine my light again, afraid of seeing something that could give me a heart attack. I could hear them moving, and then suddenly she would go quiet and start humming the same song, one I still can't get out of my head. Finally, the police arrived and opened the doors. The officer asked if I was okay, and I told him everything. He went into the gas station to check the security cameras, thinking someone had done this to me as a prank. But the footage showed the doors closing by themselves, which was impossible because there wasn't even any wind, and even if there had been, those doors were far too heavy to shut on their own. The officer was as surprised as I was. He told me to notify the company I worked for, because maybe the doors needed to be replaced. After that, I left. The whole drive afterward, I could still hear noises in the back, but I didn't bother to check anymore. I wasn't going to open those doors again until I made the delivery. When I arrived, I told the couple what had happened, because the toys were scattered all over the trailer. The wife covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes, and ran into the house. I didn't understand her reaction at first, until her husband explained that their young daughter, Lily, had passed away from a terminal illness just a month ago. That's why they were moving. The city reminded them too much of her. He also told me those toys had been hers. He had insisted to his wife that they donate them, but she refused, saying they were the only thing she had left of her daughter. The man apologized, but also asked me to tell him exactly what I had heard. It seemed to bring him a strange kind of comfort to know his daughter had been there. I told him about the song she was humming, and he said his wife had composed that song for Lily when she stayed with her at the hospital at night, when Lily couldn't sleep. Hearing that hit me hard. I felt so many emotions: fear, knowing that a deceased little girl had traveled with me and locked me inside the trailer with her, and sadness, hearing her story and seeing the grief of her parents. I'm a father too. On the way back, nothing else happened. I don't know if the little girl is still in her parents' home playing with her toys, or if they decided to donate them. Wherever she is, I just hope she's at peace. And to that couple, I wish nothing but healing. That was my story. Good night. Hello Prater and horror community. This story is not mine. It happened to my uncle when he was a truck driver here in USA in the early 2000s. I asked his permission to share it with all of you. He said yes, but only if I didn't reveal his real name, so for this story we'll call him Jose Scott. I asked to tell it because it's very disturbing and worth sharing. He first told it to us when we were younger, and later, when we were older, he told it again. Both times, it made our hair stand on end. He had a delivery in the state of Jalisco. He was going with a colleague and friend who would help him unload the cargo. He says they were near a small town early in the morning, though he doesn't remember the exact time, and as they drove, chatting, they saw a man running toward them right in the middle of the road. My uncle hit the brakes, because otherwise, he would have run him over. The man was wearing a blue gown with a logo, and he was in the middle of the highway, apparently trying to get my uncle to stop and help him. When my uncle stopped, he rolled down the window and yelled at the man, asking if he was crazy, that he could have been run over, and how could he think it was a good idea to run into the middle of the road. The man slowly approached the window. My uncle says he had a vacant stare, teary eyes, and kept repeating, "Help me, please, help me. The beast is coming." My uncle's friend asked who was chasing him, but the man just kept repeating the same thing over and over. Then my uncle noticed the logo on the gown. It was from a psychiatric hospital located nearby. My uncle discreetly told his friend so the man wouldn't hear. His friend went back to the cab to call the authorities and report that this man had escaped and was running in the middle of the road. Meanwhile, my uncle kept him engaged, telling him everything would be fine, but he never let him into the truck, even though the man kept insisting. He told him the police were already on their way and would arrive soon, and that they had to leave because they had a delivery to make. He told the man the police would help him, but they couldn't do anything else for him, and they certainly couldn't let a stranger into their truck, especially someone with mental health issues, since he could also pose a danger to them. My uncle made sure the man stayed at the side of the road, away from traffic, so he wouldn't get hit by a car, and then they left. They were already some distance away when his friend received a call from the police. They had found the man out in the fields, but completely torn apart, with his arms and legs ripped off. They had to go back to give statements because the police wanted to know if they had seen anything else. They said that whatever had done this to him must have been a very large animal with huge claws. But the strange thing was, there were no wild animals in that area. The only animals in nearby farms were pigs, horses, and sheep, nothing more. My uncle told them that the man had said the beast was chasing him, but he had assumed it was just a hallucination, since the man was a psychiatric patient. He also added that they hadn't paid much attention to the fields, focusing instead on keeping the man safe from passing cars. My uncle says the police were both confused and concerned, because the forensic experts couldn't determine what could have left the man in such a state. They knew it was an animal, and his limbs had been torn off with massive bite marks. The police said it was the most horrific thing they had seen in their careers. That was it, they let my uncle and his friend go. They never found out what happened with the case or whether they figured out what had done that to the poor man. But in the end, maybe he wasn't so crazy because he could see whatever was following him, something my uncle, unfortunately, didn't believe. Of course, my uncle felt guilty for a long time, but I also wonder, what would you have done in his place? You can't just let a stranger into your car or truck in the middle of the night, especially if you know they've escaped from a psychiatric hospital. I know there will be many different opinions, but the important part, and the real question in this story, is, what was it that did that to this man? It's something we will never know. But it's terrifying,